Before I begin, please note that this video discusses allegations of domestic abuse. Imagine being one of the highest ranking women in England, married to one of the most powerful men at King Henry VIII's court, and yet finding yourself locked away, stripped of your jewels, pinned to the ground until you spat blood, dragged from your bed by your hair and struck on the head with a dagger. Those were the claims of Elizabeth Howard, Duchess of Norfolk, and what makes her story so remarkable is that we have her own words, preserved in letters to Thomas Cromwell, along with her husband's angry rebuttal. Today I'm looking at Elizabeth's marriage to Thomas Howard, 3rd Duke of Norfolk, and the case she built of domestic abuse and coercive control. Elizabeth Howard, née Stafford, was born in around 1497, the eldest daughter of Edward Stafford, 3rd Duke of Buckingham, and Eleanor Percy. She grew up in one of the premier noble families of the realm, and she began her court career in 1509 as a maid of honour to Queen Catherine of Aragon, with whom she developed a close and lasting friendship. At the age of around 15, Elizabeth married Thomas Howard, then in his 40s. He was already a widower, having lost Anne of York, his first wife, and he would go on to become the formidable 3rd Duke of Norfolk, uncle to Anne Boleyn and a political powerhouse in the Tudor world. The early years of their marriage appear outwardly dutiful and even loving. Elizabeth followed him to Ireland during his military service, bore him 5 children, 3 of whom survived into adulthood, including Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, and Mary, Duchess of Richmond, and later described herself as a loyal wife who served at court for 16 years. But cracks began to show in the late 1520s. Norfolk took a mistress, Elizabeth Holland, known as Bess Holland, and to Elizabeth's outrage moved her into the household. Elizabeth dismissed her as a churl's daughter, a washer in my nursery, though modern historians point out that Bess was in fact of gentry background, possibly even the governess to the Duke's children. And Bess went on to serve Anne Boleyn as well. The Duke taking her as a mistress and having her live in the family home was an insult and a humiliation for the Duchess. On top of that, politics divided the couple. As the great matter unfolded, Elizabeth stood firmly with her beloved Queen Catherine of Aragon, while Norfolk supported his niece Anne Boleyn. Elizabeth spoke so freely in Catherine's defence that she was banished from court in 1531, and when Anne Boleyn was crowned queen in 1533, Elizabeth refused to attend. It was in these years that Elizabeth began to write to Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's chief minister, and in these letters she poured out a litany of grievances that, to our modern eyes, read like a textbook case of domestic abuse. She claimed that Norfolk had once ridden home through the night, locked her in a chamber, stripped her of her jewels and fine clothes, and left her with only £50 a quarter to keep 20 servants in what she called a hard country, the Duke having moved her to another house at Redbourne against her will. She described being physically assaulted by members of the household on Norfolk's orders, writing, "Because I would not suffer the board and the harlots, they bound me and sat on my breast till I spat blood." And, most shocking of all, she alleged that when she'd just given birth, her husband had dragged her by the hair out of bed and struck her on the head with his dagger. These weren't whispered rumours, these were written complaints addressed to the most powerful minister in the realm. If we read Elizabeth's words through a modern lens, they describe a pattern of what today we'd call coercive control. Isolation at Redbourne, being kept away from court. Financial restriction, reducing her household and giving her an allowance that was not appropriate to her rank. Intimidation through third parties, with household servants physically restraining her. And public attacks on her character, even from her own brother, Henry Stafford, who called her wild and willful. In short, Elizabeth was trying to tell the Tudor world that even a duchess could be trapped, silenced and disbelieved. Norfolk naturally denied everything. He insisted that the wound on Elizabeth's head had nothing to do with him, but had been cut by a surgeon for swelling after she'd had teeth pulled long before the childbirth in question. He claimed he could produce honest persons who would testify to her lies. Their children, Henry and Mary, sided with him, while Elizabeth's brother refused to take her in, fearing her wild language would ruin his family. For Norfolk, Elizabeth's letters weren't cries for help, they were slander, an attack on his honour and authority. And in Tudor society, a powerful duke's word was always likely to outweigh that of a woman, even a duchess. Elizabeth and Norfolk never reconciled, even though Elizabeth wanted reconciliation. Norfolk stayed with Bess Holland for nearly 20 years. When Norfolk was arrested for treason in late 1546, both Elizabeth and Bess were taken into custody, and both, along with the Duke's daughter Mary, gave evidence against him. Fortunately for the Duke, the King died before his scheduled execution, and he was saved, although he remained in the Tower until Mary I's succession. His wife Elizabeth lived to see the reign of Mary I, when she was restored to court and honoured with the role of bearing the Queen's train at her coronation. Elizabeth Howard died on the 30th of November 1558 and was buried in the Howard Chapel at Lambeth. So what can we say about this case? Well, we can't prove beyond doubt every detail of Elizabeth's allegations. Norfolk denied them. Her children supported him, and her own brother questioned her character. But the consistency of her letters, written over years, and the pattern they describe, the isolation, the financial control, the intimidation, give her words a chilling ring of truth. Elizabeth's story reminds us that domestic abuse is not new, and that even women at the very top of Tudor society could find themselves voiceless and powerless behind closed doors. And thanks to her letters, we can still hear her voice today. I'll give you links to read her letters for yourself. But what do you think? Do you believe Elizabeth's testimony or Norfolk's denial? Do let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this Tudor true crime investigation, please like, share and subscribe for more deep dives into the darker corners of Tudor history. I'll see you very soon.